and welcome to another installment of Reading Ready, Set, Go. And we have a special visitor here today. We were just having such a ball laughing and catching up. I have Telly Ree here today. Telly is going to give us some insights on her reading and being a reading enthusiast. She has done so great at sharing bodies of work with me. And today we're going to do a book review for, hold it up, get excited! Yay! American Marriage. So Telly, start with telling us about how you came up, what made you want to suggest this book.
I wouldn't call myself a reading enthusiast, even though I do like to read. What made me want to read this book is I heard it talked about through different reading circles and avenues. I heard it mentioned once at a book club I was involved in when I was living in Minneapolis, and I also heard about it through Goodreads and then a couple other people on my Facebook reading groups. Also, a person I had worked with at one point had recommended this book, and after hearing about it over and over and over again, I had was one day I was getting off work. This is when I still lived in Minneapolis. I was getting off work, and I had walked. I don't know if I caught the bus halfway, then walked the rest of the way to the small independent bookstore, or if I walked from work to the independent bookstore. But I just remember being on foot at one point, and I went in there, and this was the only book I had bought. Mm-hmm. And on my way out of the bookstore, it started pouring down, thundering raining on my way home, walking home. And so what I did was I was crossing past a Bank of America, and I kind of stood under, because the bank was already closed, and I wasn't going to go inside anyway. I don't have an account with Bank of America, so I kind of stood under entryway to get out from under the rain. And the rain had let up a little bit, so I kept walking, and I seen a Walgreens along the way. So I was like, well, let me go in this Walgreens and just buy a little knickknacks, just to gather around a little bit more. So I bought some ice cream or something like that. So I was thinking, after going through all of that to get this book, I was surely going to read it. And reading through the book and getting the premise of it, I was like, I want to read this book with someone. I was like, I want to read it with you, because the last time we had read a book together, it had to be, I was probably 13 years old. So 20 years ago, we read Sister Soldiers, Coldest Winter Ever together. That's the last book we had read together and discussed. And I was like, well, this is a book you might like that we can read and discuss together.
Awesome. So you went through a lot to get the book, and we went through a lot today together trying to record about the book.
Well, you want to know the funny thing is, the copy of the book that you actually have is the one that I bought at that bookstore, and I rebought my own copy on Amazon.
Okay, so then let's go into it. American Marriage. Would you say that how did this book represent marriage to you? What did you learn about marriage through this book?
I wouldn't say that I learned anything about marriage through this book. One thing I will say that I did learn is, when you go into a marriage I wouldn't say I learned this, it's just me witnessing it through a work of fiction, is when you go into a marriage strictly for selfish reasons only, that marriage it will not last. And it going through different trials and tribulations, it is going to expose the weakness of the marriage.
And so, which character would you say you empathize with the most?
I would say definitely Roy, because just getting back to the beginning of this book, the main plot of this book is a black man is falsely accused of a crime that he did not commit, which is the act of rape, and he then loses 5 years of his life behind bars, which people say caused the downfall of his marriage. I would say I empathize with Roy simply because of that situation, though I do not focus on that so much. You know, like being African American, growing up in, you know, with your family and in the church and in your community, you hear stories of Roy. It is not uncommon to many black people in America. You hear about it on the news. To discuss it at the dinner table. You discuss it in church. You know of these things. You know about Emmett Till. You know about black men who were falsely accused of rape and then hung, you know, in a crowd full of white men cheering it on. You hear about the stories of black men being vindicated, their charges being you know, overturned after spending 30 years in prison for a rape that they did not commit. We know these stories. These stories are everyday to us. So I didn't get hung up on that because that is a known. I sympathize with Roy in the fact that behind closed bars, when his life is falling apart, he cannot do anything about it physically. He can't go out and save his marriage. Even though I don't like the basis of what their marriage was founded on. He can't go and be with his mother who passes away behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. So I sympathize with him being forced behind bars and can't fix anything in his life. So I sympathize with that.
That's a good point that you brought up. And so real quick, there will be spoiler alerts. I think this body of work came out in 2018. So if you do not want to have any spoilers, please feel free to click off. But I don't think knowing the plot of the book will keep you from reading the book because it's a character study. But real quick, I do see what you're saying. And I think that's one of the flaws I found in Roy is that I tend to be one of those persons that when I'm truly going through, I would have used that time behind bars to get to I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but as a person who internalizes a lot, I probably would have told my spouse to go away. Only because if your heart didn't want you to be there anyway, coming and seeing me is going to be complicated anyway. So like when she would go visit him, he could tell her demeanor, she would have like some type of attitude. And so I would rather be by myself than to be in the space where you're dreading coming to see me anyway. And then on top of that, I felt like he was still holding on, but I'm like, what were you ever really holding on to? Because like even at the beginning, it seemed like there was really the foundation of their marriage was based off of facades anyway. And so I would just be curious to know, like, I wish the writer would have delved more into the introspective of things that Roy had, and I don't feel like he did a good job, because even with learning where, once again, this is a spoiler, that his dad was in the same prison as him, it seemed like they kind of glazed over everything, and that like the dad was just kind of his little guardian angel, like Jimmy the Cricket, who popped in and popped out with these country sayings, but they never did give any depth. And to kind of compare it to something, I recently watched All Day and a Night, and it was the same premise, except for the main character was like, I know all my downfall is because of my dad, and my problem with life is locked up in here with me. And that was the most profound thing I had ever heard, because there's not very much African American content in which there's the psycho and sociological review and reflection on self, and you know what's causing it, and you can identify like those things. So I wish that the author would have dived more into the psychosomatics of Roy, because it would have had to be mentally draining. But then it seemed like his whole mind was trying to keep his marriage together. I don't know. I think it was about priorities. What you think?
I mean, I think with the characters, what this really exposed is the falsehood of the American dream for Black people. Especially young Black people who, when in our 20s and 30s is when the time we have the most hope. And when you look at Celestial, who is the wife, and you look at Roy, who is the husband, who is falsely incarcerated, you have two people who are trying to attain this American dream when it is not meant for Black people to obtain.
So you need to definitely peel back on that. You need to unpack that.
So, for example, they had this image in their mind of what this marriage is supposed to do for them, and it did none of that. So when you look at Celestial, who experienced a trauma in her at the age of 18 with being having an affair with a professor at Howard University where she was attending, getting pregnant and getting an abortion, how I read the book and how I interpret Celestial, she wanted this marriage with Roy to undo that, to remove that stain from her life. And by getting into this marriage with this educated man from Morehouse, who it was just standing back and looking at Roy, he looked like upward mobility, which, you know, in American society, the institutions in American society has been set up for Black people not to be upwardly mobile. So when you look at Roy, who looks upwardly mobile, who is not going to question my past, and who isn't going to prevent me from achieving my own dreams, because Celestial has dreams of her, displaying her artwork, her dolls, which Roy strongly encourages. So he's not going to hinder me in achieving my goals. He's not going to question me about my past, because Roy also has skeletons in his own closet not related to his conviction. And someone who also admires my family, because Roy greatly admires her family. He wants to be upper class Black man like her father, who worships her family. Roy seems like a great person, and a great person to help remove that stain from my past, which is having an affair with my professor, getting pregnant by my professor, and then getting a child aborted. He was meant to remove that stain so she can feel better a part of American society, because she feels, I guess, ashamed that had happened, and Roy was supposed to do that. And then for Roy, Celestial represents him continue to achieve that upward mobility by marrying to an upper class Black family in Atlanta, to be a part of that upper class Black society. That's what he admires. That's what was exposed to him through attending Morehouse, and what he's achieving to get. And both of them fall short of achieving what they feel would be their American dream.
So how would you describe, if you had to describe the book in one word, what word would you select?
I would select the word immature. And why I say that is because even though this is a sad situation, it's a heartbreaking situation that Roy finds himself in, how the characters such as Celestial and Roy reacted to dealing with this situation. Because even though they're young, they're still in their early 30s. And, I feel that Roy gives into the conviction, even though he continues with the appeal process, which, it goes in his favor eventually, but he still spends 5 years behind bars. He just gives into his conviction. Celestial also gives into his conviction. With them both going to HBCUs, greatly respected HBCUs, with her going to Spelman, him going to Morehouse. that in itself would have given them connections to certain Black organizations. We know that Black organizations like the NAACP and the Urban League and all that had connections with HBCUs, you know, that they didn't meet anybody that they could talk to from those organizations to help. That, you know, even with Celestial's father, who is I guess he like a scientist or something that creates an invention for juice or something.
Did he sell his invention? Is that how he?
Yeah, that's how he became a millionaire.
Okay. And then they bought like a house on the end of the road,
something like that. But you know, not to get too much off the point, is he knew the lawyer that worked to get defend Roy. But that could not have been the only connection he knew. He would have been, because Atlanta is a city, but it's not that big. And even though I think Atlanta has the biggest Black middle class and upper class, but it's not that big. He would have been well connected in these communities, which those people would have then had connections to, you know, powerful organizations that could have helped Roy in his situation. You know what I'm saying? That could have helped Roy, and would have brought media attention to Roy's situation. When you read how Tayari Jones explained his trial, it sounds very speedy. Like the lawyers made
feel like they had public prosecutors and public.
Yeah, like the lawyer,
which is like very.
And it was actually a small town prosecutor that I'm sure that the lawyer that was working on Roy's case could have easily ate up. There was a small town prosecutor. They said they had, a small town jury. And I'm sure that, yes, seeing Roy, when you in a court, Black men are seen as guilty until proven innocent. We know these things. I don't want to dive deep in it because within our community, we know these things. But what I'm saying is no actions were taken.
But was the victim in the courtroom? Did the victim have to testify? I don't remember. Did the victim have to testify? She wasn't there.
I really don't know. I don't remember that. I don't remember if she was there or if she wasn't there. I don't remember because it's been a minute since I've read this. But the fact that they just fell into his conviction without much fight, it's kind of weird. How did you feel about that? How they just kind of gave into his conviction?
I've experienced several times with it. I can't, everything was reduced down to maybe a half chapter. And then he was so willingly, he was disappointed. But I've seen people that be guilty and plead not guilty do a bigger scene in the courtroom than that. It would have been gas. This was almost aligning with the little, the Central Park 5. That it was too huge. It would have been too huge of a case back then, especially with the Rodney. It would have been off the verge of Rodney King. It would have been off the verge of the young lady that was killed in that supermarket in California. This just would have been all it needed, to exonerate you got O.J. Simpson happening. It just would have been more fuel on the flame, and then you would have had a perfect face for the revolution because he had no prior convictions. He was a college graduate. So there wouldn't have been any social media to pick him apart and call him a thug. He was there with his wife at the hotel.
And also I remember the book talking about how it was his family, his mom and his stepdad, who at first he believes is his biological dad. So I think up until the age of 5 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Roy Sr. and Roy's mother, who I guess people knew them in the community. It's a small knit community. They didn't go to the church and rally the church and behind Roy. I just felt that it was a little a little immature in how the defense for Roy. I feel it was a little immature and a little ignorant how their response to Roy's charges. You know, I was. It was a little irresponsible, a little immature how they responded to that. And I would say immature for Celestial because Celestial never really had to face trauma and hardship. At the time that she did face it, for example, when she was at Howard, you know, at the age of 18 with the professor and an abortion, her family aided and abetted in her victimhood by, you know, the father getting a lawyer, getting his friend who's the lawyer, the same lawyer that also defended Roy, you know, getting that lawyer to bring action against the school. You know, the lawyer's wife who takes Celestial under her arm and hides her away from the world to protect her from that situation. Celestial's mother who to bond with her daughter, to make her daughter feel better, confides in her that she met Celestial's father through, you know, with it being an affair. Celestial's father was still a married man when Celestial's mother and him got together. So she uses that story to bond with Celestial during that situation. So they protected her from that situation with her having no accountability. Yes, I understand she was 18. Yes, I understand that she was a student and that was the professor and he's in a position of power. But there was no accountability with that situation at all, which then puts Celestial in a state of victimhood. So when she goes into Roy's situation, she plays the victim at the time when he is the victim. She plays the victim. And even later, we'll get into that, you know, get more into the story later, even the situation after he gets out of prison and she has started a relationship with another man, she then plays the victim once Roy is released from prison. So she's never held accountable for the parts that she plays in different situations of trauma.
So then going back to the question about one word, I would say then, I know we were talking about this earlier and I may have said something else, but I would say passive. This is the first form of African American literature that was the most passive book of work, most passive, aggressive, and passive written. And then the fact that it carried across about every single character in the book was passive to some capacity. And it really made me sit down and think, like, is it that I'm too aggressive and that these characters are not passive? Or is it that it really is truly a passive? Because when I think about it, everybody was very quiet and passive about everything. Even the dad in prison with him. He got it to where they got switched around in the same, like all of this was happening. He got it switched around where him and his son was in the same bunker together. Not even having, it took him a while to tell him, or however he found out about his dad being his dad. Very passive. His mom didn't come forward with her sickness. The stepdaddy really didn't come forth at first about, I'm not really your dad. Okay, Celestial's parents didn't come forth about their affairs and how they worked around their finances. And Celestial just didn't come out and say, I don't want to be married anymore. Roy couldn't say, you know, I see that this is hurting you. Let's just terminate this. You know, it's just a lot of passive. I guess that's what makes this a unique fiction, because in other writers that we tend to have, it's like everything is always all up in your face. You know, right up front what people are thinking. This is the first time it was just like, wasn't a bad thing, but this is the first time I truly was reading a story versus seeing myself in the pages. And I always look to that when I read, to find myself somewhere in the literature, to most of the time to give myself some type of counseling or to see myself, to perfect myself and make myself better. But this is the first time I looked and I was just like, don't even, like people say this would have been your friend in college. Like, I don't think that they would have been my friends in college. They would have been people I knew of. But for us being friends, I just think no one across the board ever really just kind of, I think Celestial's father tried to at the Thanksgiving or the Christmas dinner, But at that point, it was met with bad reception because at this point, it just really was falling on deaf ears. What you think?
Yes, I think everyone in the book is pretty passive. But do you think it is, you know, I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going to go with that. So I'm just going to kind of direct
No, you're fine.
You know, direct it somewhere else. Do you feel the love between these two characters?
Absolutely not. Never did. And I think that's why, and I told you, okay, let me preface by saying, I think this is a great book to read, especially to spark conversation. However, it was hard for me to really sometimes, at some points, to really dive in. It took me quite a while to read this book. And I think it was because if you load the book full of like emotions and pack, like some books I can just get through in one day because they're speaking to my emotional streams. This one, I just, from the beginning, like it didn't even, I think we were still in chapter 1 when he tried to make her feel some kind of way because he likes to collect numbers from women. That right there, I was just like, okay, this is going to be real interesting because, excuse me, you're in a whole marriage now. What are you still doing out here needing validation from anybody? Then I had to remember, well, how old are they? Are they super young? But even still, like, I don't know. I never felt the foundation, because like that's, when I think of marriage, that tends to come up for me a lot is, do I feel at home with this individual? Is this person home? I don't mean an apartment. I don't mean leasing a room. Does this person feel like a whole home, a wood burning stove home? And they felt like roommates and apartments. Like they didn't feel like long time, I'm gonna make this work. The type of love that defies feeling good, meaning the bad times. And I just think it was always gonna be something, even if it wasn't him being wrongfully incarcerated. It was gonna be something. What you think?
I did not feel the love between these characters, and I know that we shouldn't look at these emotions as something you should be able to feel off printed work, because we don't go up to married couples in real life and say, you know, oh, I feel the love between you two, or I don't feel the love between you two. It's not for us to judge that. But in these pages, Rita, I did not feel a connection to these characters, and I didn't feel like these characters were connected to themselves, to each other. So I did not feel that. Was there a sense that maybe these couples had maybe some love or care for one another? Maybe. I think these couples were more in love. I seen off the pages that these characters were more in love with what they thought this marriage could do for them. So like I said, I felt that Celestial thought that this marriage would erase that stain from her past, what happened at Howard. And I feel that for him, this marriage meant his ticket into the black upper class. And why she was so quick to let him go after he got incarcerated was because he could no longer be that eraser of that stain for her. Mm-hmm. You know, with him being incarcerated, because she finds out that she's pregnant once he gets locked up, and they decide to abort their baby, her and Roy. Mm-hmm. And I feel that Celestial thought the children that she was going to have with Roy were going to be born into this upwardly mobile black family. And once those charges of rape was placed on him and he was locked up, those children would not be born into that idea of pristine that she was going to then use to erase her past that happened at Howard. So with that, with that no longer being the case, there was no use for Roy and for that child anymore. And then for Roy, only thing that he had left after he was convicted and sent to prison, only thing he had left to to that lifestyle that he wanted was Celestial, and that's why he held on to her. He no longer
I
had
didn't even think about that because I was like, why did he hold on to her? He held on her tighter than he held on to his mama.
He no longer had his job. He no longer had his suits that made him feel empowered. You know, he I guess he could say he still had his education, but that education would have been overshadowed by him now being a felon. Only thing that he had actual ties to was Celestial through their marriage, their marriage certificate. That was it. That was his last string left, that was still attached to his chance of being a part of the upper class, the black upper class. So that's why he held on to her, and by Roy not being able to be that erasure of that stain on her past, that's why she was so quick to let Roy go.
Well, then break down your thoughts on Andre, because in my mind I was thinking, Andre, do you not value yourself this much?
So Andre is their mutual friend that was Celestial's childhood friend, but was also a mutual friend between Roy, because Roy and Andre went to Morehouse together, and Roy met Celestial through Andre. And Andre's character reveals the betrayal. So like I said, could there have been love between Celestial and Roy? Did they probably care about each other? Of course. But love and care doesn't stop betrayal. Only thing that stops betrayal is loyalty. So,
but do you not think those are mutually?
Andre was there.
Do you find that those three are mutually exclusive? Do you find that loyalty, love are mutually, like, they're exclusive?
I do, because there's people that we're loyal to that we do not even like.
You're right.
There's been I'm sure there's people who are loyal to their mother-in-law that they might not like, that they're loyal to their supervisors that they might not care too much for, or there's people who are loyal to maybe a political party that they do not, that their worldview no longer aligns with, but they still vote for. I do feel that and there's also situation where you love someone but you still hurt them. So I do feel that. I do feel that they are exclusive, and Andre, he's there to actually show that. He's there to show that you may love someone, you may care about someone, but that loyalty for that person is not there. And that's where he comes in and exposes the fractures in the foundation of their marriage.
Do you think,
because
redemptive qualities about Andre? Like, because in my mind, I keep judging him, thinking, how do you expect to have a blessed marriage when you've been a participant? Although he really wasn't the main gist of the pain, but then it was so bad as he even went and spent time with Roy.
With Andre, my thing is good. My thing is with Andre. Andre's seen a house on fire, and he goes and pours more gasoline on it. Yes, that house is on fire. But my thing is, that doesn't give you the license to then go and it doesn't give you the license to go and make it worse, to continue the flames. He wasn't there with a water hose. He was there with.
Would you say that he really wanted to see the unwinding of their marriage?
No, I'm not saying.
Let me say the second part. Or do you think he wanted to just be with Celestial that bad?
I don't think he meant to hurt anybody. I just think he wanted what he wanted.
So regardless if he was married or not,
they're open, but they're married. But my thing is, Celestial opened up that marriage for him to get what he wanted, which he wanted Celestial. He had always been in love with her ever since they were young, and he used. Did he want to see his friend locked up? Absolutely not. But if there was an opening, he was going to take it. And my thing is this: he had an affair with Celestial on the same day that he went to Roy's mother's funeral in his place, because Roy couldn't go because he was locked up. He was supposed to be attending Roy's mother's funeral. That same night, he slept with Celestial, and that what started their relationship.
They technically never did say they did sleep together. They said that they went out to the bar and they were intoxicated.
No, they do sleep together when they go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't forgot. Sorry. I thought that they just was hanging out at the bar.
No, it talks about how they go back into the hotel room and then Celestial seduces him.
Because remember, you're right. I guess I was thinking about with the young lady that, okay, so then Roy, so once again, welcome to Rita Ready, Set, Go. We're looking at an American marriage. And this book is particularly about what happens to a marriage when an individual, the husband is wrongfully incarcerated, and what happens to the foundations of that relationship. And so moving forward, then Roy gets out of prison, and there's like this holding period. I want to say, what was it, a week he was out? And he hadn't called nobody. He got out like a week early, so he was quiet.
Something like that, maybe like a couple of days or something.
Okay, and then he meets somebody. And then, okay, now what was your thoughts on the girl that he met? How would you say the girl that Roy met is any different than Andre? Do you think they're similar?
My thing is this, with that situation, I don't look at her as an individual character to be critiqued, because they would have been, the author to Yuri Jones would have then gave
her a chapter.
Would have opened up her background and gave her a voice within the story. She was not there to represent an individual character. She was there to represent that the love that we're supposed to believe that Celestial and Roy had really wasn't as strong as what was being believed. Because if he really was in love with Celestial the way he say he was, the first thing he would do when he got to prison was to go shoot up to Atlanta to go see her. Because I think he was incarcerated in Louisiana.
Yeah.
The first thing he would have did was,
what was his name? Alloy?
Well, something like that.
Yeah.
He would have went up to Atlanta to get his woman. The first thing he thought about was trying to lay low, and get up under another woman. If his feelings for Celestial was that strong, and he was having dreams of being with her every single night, he would not have thought to go get up under another woman. So that just goes to show that no, their bond and their love really wasn't as strong as these characters make it seem that it was. It was just, this marriage was to feed an image that they thought they could obtain, and they didn't. And once those dreams were shattered, it exposes that love did not exist. And that's why it was easy for Celestial to seduce Andre on the same day that they went to Roy's mother's funeral, and why it was easy for Roy to go be with another woman after he had got out of prison.
So then, thinking about the time in between where he's about to get out. Okay, no, let's go back. Let's go even more forward. So he gets out, and then now he's, the dad is talking to him, and he makes the decision to go to Atlanta. And I think it was interesting because Celestial outlines that she felt like it was somebody watching her or something, like eerie. The fact that she was describing those moments as eerie leading up to her going back to the house. Did you get that sense that it was like eerie? Remember she was leaving the dog shop?
I remember. I did get that sense. But I also got the sense of, oh my gosh, there's no one in a sense, how I also read that was the woman who was working with her, the young lady that was working with her in the shop was no longer there. And then that customer who she was, attending to had left, or she was attending to him, and then he eventually left. And Andre was in Louisiana hoping to speak with Roy, but Roy had already left to go up to Atlanta to see Celestial.
But that was clear.
So this was her first time having to face a serious situation face to face on her own. And that's what I got, that she was scared that now I would have to face Roy on my own. I don't have anyone I don't have anyone who could serve as a buffer. I don't have anyone who can protect me from a situation that only I can fix, because she was so used to people fixing things for her, like her parents back at Howard, and having Andre going down to Louisiana to talk to Roy on her behalf, or I think Andre wanted to talk to Roy on his own anyway, but also on the behalf of Celestial as well. So Celestial was thinking, okay, I'm out of this situation. I don't have to deal with.
Yeah, because she thought she had 7 more years.
She doesn't have to deal with Roy, and then pop up. Here's Roy. She's like, oh my gosh, how am I deal with it? Because I've been having people to protect me my whole life. Now I have to stand up on my own.
She thought she had 7 more years worth of stalling.
And that's also why. So that night when her friend had came over with the child and the drinks, she was kind of relieved because that served as a buffer between her and Roy. And then once the friend had left, she was like, oh my gosh, now I have to really deal with this because there's no one else coming over at this time of night. I really have to deal with this on my own.
So then I noticed, like, she began, okay, so they're in a home, and it goes through several chapters of this discord. So they're talking then they're not talking. Like, it was several different viewpoints of this conversation that spanned over, was it a whole 24 hours, or it was a 24-hour total, wasn't it? It was that night.
Yeah, then it goes
to that next day. Was it 2 days? It was 1.
I don't remember.
I think
it was 1. Wait, okay, I think he gets there
that night.
That late afternoon or early evening.
Yeah,
they were kind of talking for a little bit, and that friend comes over, and then she leaves, and then doesn't he?
He was already in the house.
No. He was in the house before the friend got there. And then the friend comes over with her little boy, and then they eventually leave after a couple hours, and it's just him and Celestial.
That's how you know they wanted.
and then the friend comes over. The friend comes over with the little boy and the drinks. Mm-hmm. And then she meets Roy, and she kind of sees Roy, and Roy doesn't look his handsome self because he had
specialized, yeah.
And then the friend eventually leaves with her child because it starts to get late. Because, at one point, Roy is playing with the child. Mm-hmm. They leave, and then now it's just Celestial on her own with Roy again. And then later on in the night, Roy then wants to be intimate with her, and then she...
Okay, go back to that, because that's what okay, so the intimacy. Let me see if I remember this correct. So, the intimacy... Did he initiate that first time? Because it seemed like Celestial initiates as well on another occasion.
That's later, but no,
okay.
No, he initiates this. She refuses several times, and he gets upset, but he finally leaves the bedroom and sleeps somewhere else. That next morning, I believe she cooks him breakfast or something, and then he goes into the garage and he gets upset.
Going through his stuff, and he started putting on his clothes.
Yeah, he takes a tennis racket and hits the car, and he starts
spazzing out.
He starts dumping his boxes out in the yard. Then later, that's when Andre shows up and they get into a fight.
So go back to Andre's daddy. What advice did Andre's daddy have for him moving forward in this? And what did you think about the advice he was given?
So before Andre goes to meet Roy, Andre goes and seeks advice from his father. Andre's father really wasn't in Andre's life that much because he was unfaithful to Andre's mother. Then they divorced, and he goes and lives with and marries the woman that he had an affair with, and starts a whole new family, and kind of puts Andre to the side. So when he goes and meets up with his father to seek that advice, what Andre does, I'm not shocked at the advice.
You think you're gonna get your ass beat?
You know, when he
but if you love her,
when he tells him, if you know, whatever you do, you know, do it as a man. If you're doing wrong as a man, accept the consequences as a man. And I'm not shocked at that, because that's the life that Andre's father lived. You know, a man who started a whole new relationship out of an affair is not going to give his son the best advice. He's going to tell his son, hey, maybe you should learn from my mistakes, but I can't give you better advice than that, because you know, I follow my own heart. You know, I follow my own heart.
Did you think it was interesting that he wasn't there for him as a father because could financially afford for him to go to college? Did you think that was interesting?
No, I didn't see anything
not out of normal about it.
I did, because my thing is this: both his parents had money.
Who, Andre?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that neighborhood that they lived in was an upper middle class Black neighborhood.
No, I'm just saying, do you not think it's interesting that he kind of described his father as kind of absent a little bit, but he still paid for his school? He didn't have to pay for his school.
No, I mean, I don't see that as unusual. I mean, we've seen that with, you know, things that maybe athletes and hip hop artists, and they also, we hear that they've done the same thing. I'm not shocked at that. I mean,
I thought it was
you gotta keep in mind, by him doing that little bit of paying for his college, that would still continue that little bit of relationship between Andre and his father.
Okay, I get your perspective. I thought it was unique. Okay, and so they're Celestial and Roy, because you know those last 50 pages was challenging for me. So Celestial and Roy he at the house, you know, he figured out that she'd been seeing Andre. So then, do you think Celestial really wanted him, or she really was done when he immediately got locked up? Like, when do you think Celestial was done? Immediately.
Yes. Celestial, like I said, the marriage to Roy was to undo her situation, her past. And by him getting locked up, took the prestige off that marriage, took the shine off that marriage. Let's just say he got locked up and it was oops, made a mistake, let's let you go.
Mm-hmm.
It still would have been enough for Celestial to walk, because it was, that blemish was still there. You know, it's like when you get a brand new car and, you know, on your way to driving it home, a kid's bike kind of nicks it. The car, you still love that car. It's still nice. It's still new. But you kind of, every time you walk to go get into the car, you kind of notice that little nick in the paint. So that's what that him getting arrested is. That's why, you know, even when they talk about in the letters, when they discuss in the letters her aborting her baby while he hasn't even went to trial yet, this is just him, you know, locked up and is awaiting trial. They decide to abort their child. She doesn't fight for that child. She doesn't fight to save that child, even though that child is conceived within wedlock. She still decides to abort that child because that child's not coming into this pristine idea of a family that she had imagined to undo her last situation.
Okay, we're going to round this out to two more questions. The very last thing, what did you think about the overall ending? Did you think that the ending was well done? That's how you would have done it? What were your thoughts?
It was a very simple ending, but I wasn't expecting much from the ending. Just because the author didn't give us much throughout any of the book. You know, I would say the second part of the book, because I think the first part is where she's explaining how these characters meet and how they feel about each other. Then the second part, and also the leading up to the conviction, and then the second part is letters. And I love that part, how she explains their relationship through letters.
Oh, I love that.
I love that part, but the way it reads as if it was building up to something. Those letters felt like they were building up to something that was going to be profound, and then when you get to that third part and it's just as dead as the beginning, I wasn't expecting, I like the letter writing was building up to something, like it had your heart racing, and then when you get to the third part that introduces Andre and then Roy getting out of prison and how Celestial decides to deal with her marriage, I was expecting more, and I didn't get it. So when the book ended simply of them going their separate ways, Roy getting back with the woman that he slept with when he got out of prison and decide not to have children or get married. I don't know if they get married or not. I don't remember. And then Celestial deciding to be with Andre and have his child. I expected that for Celestial, because Andre was the one that provided her that pristine living, that pristine environment, that idea of her American dream that was going to undo the stain of the first abortion. And, finally I could have a baby with a guy who has not been touched by drama or trauma. I expected that ending for her. I really did not expect Roy's ending, because it goes back to Roy just falling. He once again falls within his conviction because he does nothing to undo the conviction after he gets out of prison. He doesn't sue the state of Louisiana for false imprisonment. He just goes on with life as if none of this stuff ever happens, and it settles down in this homely life with, that woman, which kind of resembles the life that his mother and stepfather had, that he was used to being raised in, which is weird because he worked so hard to get away from that type of living, to go to move up to Atlanta to get into this upper.
But I think that was the point. That was the point.
He gets out of prison and just settles into the life that he was trying so hard to get away from.
That was, I think, the gist of like any of the stories that we ever come across, whether it be the prodigal son, that everything we really wanted. To me, Roy was raised to be with a woman like his mother. So anything else.
But do you find it funny that at the end of all this, Celestial got what she wanted without having to be accountable? She still never had to be accountable.
That's about right.
She never had to be accountable about what happened to Roy. And yet she's, at the end of the day, she still got what she wanted.
But it's going to catch up. Like, you think you're doing something, it's eventually going to catch up, whether it be 15 years from now, she all of a sudden has some mini breakdown or something go her way. Or it could be that Andre steps out on her. Like, it catches up. What I learned through Roy is all you ever needed was at home. All you ever wanted, he was trying to create somebody, but the things he was groomed to be, like his stepdad, and want to be with somebody like his mama.
Okay,
I'm not saying his mom, but
how did you feel about the letter that Roy was reading, the letter that was in his boxes of stuff that he had dumped out in the yard after, Celestial had rejected him, and he had took his boxes and dumped them out in the yard. He found the letter that his mom wrote, saying that I really don't want you to be with this woman. This woman is not good for you in any aspect of your life.
But she always was kind of saying that though. Like, she ain't like her. But what did you think about when it came out that she had done slapped Celestial across her face? Remember the Celestial went to go see the mama.
No, I remember. I didn't think nothing of it because I felt that was going to kind of come anyway. Because I kind of felt like during that you kind of seen where Celestial was backing off from Roy, not visiting him and stuff, because the mom was visiting him every single Sunday or something like that, and then Celestial will come like once every 2 to 3 months. I kind of felt it leading up to them having a clash anyway about how I'm his mom and I'm here with him all the time. You're his wife, and we have to check in with you, like, where are you at? Why you ain't visiting him? So I kind of felt that it was leading up to that anyway.
I think the mama knew, but I think she loved her son so much, and I think she felt she probably owed her son something from what how her son, that she was with his original dad, and that didn't work. Like, I could think that she was just trying to protect him. She didn't do nothing wrong, but I think that she knew. But for the sake of time, last question: how would you recommend this book? How would you rate this book?
I rate this book a 3 out of 5, not simply because it is an amazing book. I recommended 3 out of 5. I mean, I rated it a 3 out of 5 because the conversation that comes from this book is really fun. The discussion you could have around this book is really interesting. I find the discussions that I've had with other people and I've had with you to be way more interesting than the book itself. So I would say that I give it 3 out of 5 because this book provokes conversation. It really makes you think about things. It really makes you look at characters. Since there's not a lot to play with, the author doesn't give you a lot to play with when it comes to these characters. So it gives you room to fill in those holes with your own imagination. So I do like that. I don't like that the author doesn't give you anything. She doesn't this book is very two-dimensional. The characters are very flat. I don't feel any connections to the characters. I didn't feel the connection between the characters amongst each other. So I did not like that. It is a quick read if you have the time. I found it hard to get through in certain parts just because it just felt so flat. Yeah. That was like, I was like she would build up to something, and then when you would get there, it would die. Like, it was like you built up to this and you leave us with nothing. So it does give you room to just fill in those holes with your own imagination. This is a great book to read with a club because it will spark a lot of conversation. So I would recommend it. I would recommend this book just to get other people's thoughts on these characters in this situation. I would not say this is a good book to use to discuss, the criminal justice system or anything like that. When it comes to Black men, I would not do that. I would just refer them to Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow and leave it at that. I would not use this book to dive into that because it does a very poor job at explaining the situation that Black men go through with the criminal justice system and law enforcement and false accusations. I think the book does a very poor job at contributing to that conversation. I would never recommend this book on that topic at all. What about you? What would you rate this book, and would you recommend it?
I would recommend it. I would give it a 5 out of 5 for a book club. For a book club where you're meeting up and talking about it each, I wouldn't do because there is some points, I would do maybe a 3-rounder or even a 4-rounder each month, like every, once a week meet up and discuss, a part of the 4 parts. Because I think there's some situations where individuals could give their own perspective and not feel guilty because it's a 2-dimensional story. You can tell it's a story, so you won't feel you could have that you were being judged for judging them. So for a book club, definitely 5 out of 5. For an individual, the type of books that I personally like to read, I would give it a 2.5 or a 3 out of 5.
All right. Thank you for having me. I look forward to reviewing more books. I cannot wait to do one on this one. This was going to be fun. I think we should have a glass of wine when we do this one.
Not a glass of wine.
A glass of wine because it's good.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.